Picture this. It's a Wednesday morning. You're scrolling through your phone while your coffee cools, and you decide to check your investment app like you do every few days. Something catches your eye. Yesterday, your portfolio went up by $387. You pause for a second and do the mental calculation. After taxes, your actual take-home from yesterday's 8-hour shift was around $298. Your investments made more while you were at work than you actually earned working. And then the realization hits you like a freight train. This isn't a one-time thing anymore. This is starting to become normal. Your money is generating returns that are beginning to consistently match or exceed what you're trading your time for. You could, in theory, skip tomorrow's shift entirely and you'd still make money. Not enough to survive on yet, but the gap is closing. Your capital is starting to outwork your labor. This specific moment has a technical name in the world of personal finance. It's called the crossover point. And here's what keeps me awake at night, thinking about this. The vast majority of people will spend 4 decades in the workforce and never even realize this milestone exists, let alone achieve it. They'll exchange hours for dollars until they hit 65, then cross their fingers that Social Security and whatever scraps they've managed to save will somehow be sufficient to cover their remaining years. But there's an alternative route, a mathematical certainty that, once you truly grasp it, fundamentally transforms how you view every single dollar that enters your life and every single dollar that exits it. My name is Evan, and I'm borderline obsessed with identifying the invisible inflection points that separate people who are economically dependent from people who are economically sovereign. If you've ever felt like you're sprinting on a treadmill that keeps accelerating beneath your feet, or if the concept of financial freedom resonates with you but all the advice feels abstract and useless, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're not about to discuss meal planning apps or cutting out coffee. We're going to identify the precise calendar date, a date you can calculate right this moment when you officially exit the rat race. Here's what makes the crossover point so fundamentally different from other financial concepts. It's not some philosophical framework or mindset shift or vague aspiration about being rich someday. It's a concrete, quantifiable, mathematically inevitable threshold that you will cross if you execute specific behaviors consistently over time. The framework originates from a groundbreaking book called Your Money or Your Life, written by Vicky Robin and Joe Dominguez, originally published back in 1992. It remains one of the most critical ideas in all of personal finance, and yet almost nobody actually understands it or applies it. Let me break down exactly what this means. Your financial life can be visualized as 2 distinct lines plotted on a graph, both moving forward through time. The first line represents your living expenses. This is what survival costs you every single month. Housing, whether that's rent or a mortgage, food, transportation, insurance premiums, utilities, entertainment, medical expenses, everything required to maintain your current lifestyle. For the typical American household, this figure hovers somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 monthly, though it varies dramatically based on your geographic location, your life stage, and your lifestyle choices. The second line represents your investment income. This is the money your assets generate for you passively through mechanisms like dividend payments, interest accumulation, and capital appreciation. For most people starting their financial journey, this line is essentially horizontal at 0. Maybe you've got a few thousand sitting in a savings account earning 3% annual interest, generating maybe $10 per month. That's not creating any meaningful change in your life. But here's the part that most people completely fail to understand. As you contribute to your investments month after month, year after year, that second line begins to curve upward, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. You might not even notice it's happening. But compound growth operates on an exponential function, which means the trajectory accelerates over time. That investment income line isn't climbing in a straight diagonal. It's climbing in a curve that becomes steeper and steeper the longer you remain invested in the system. The crossover point is the precise moment when your investment income line ascends above your expense line, the instant when the passive cash flow from your portfolio exceeds what you require to live. When employment transitions from mandatory to optional because your capital is generating sufficient returns to fund your existence, whether you show up to work or not. Let me attach some actual numbers to this framework, because the mathematics is where this becomes genuinely fascinating. Let's say your monthly cost of living is $4,000. That translates to $48,000 annually. Using the standard 4% safe withdrawal rate, which is the generally accepted rule for how much you can sustainably extract from a portfolio indefinitely without depleting it, you would need $1.2 million in invested assets to generate that $48,000 per year. That's your personal crossover point number, $1.2 million. Now, I already know what you're thinking, Evan. $1.2 million? That's completely unrealistic. I'll never accumulate that much money. But let's actually run the mathematics on how long the journey takes, because I think the results will surprise you. Let's say you're currently 30 years old, earning $60,000 annually, and you're investing $500 every month. We'll assume an average annual return of 8%, which is actually below the historical average of the S&P 500 index over the past century. Here's how the timeline unfolds. After 10 years, at age 40, your portfolio would contain approximately $91,000. Your annual investment income at a 4% withdrawal rate would be roughly $3,600 or $300 per month. That's barely making a dent in your $4,000 monthly expense requirement. The two lines aren't anywhere close to intersecting yet, but keep going. After 20 years, at age 50, you'd have accumulated around $275,000, investment income of approximately $11,000 annually, or about $900 monthly. Still not sufficient to cover your expenses, but notice how the gap is closing at an accelerating rate now. After 25 years, at age 55, you'd be sitting on roughly $430,000, investment income of about $17,000 per year, which is $1,400 per month. You're now generating over a third of your monthly expenses passively, and this is where that exponential curve really starts to demonstrate its power. After 30 years, at age 60, you'd have approximately $670,000, investment income approaching $27,000 annually. You're now generating over $2,000 per month passively. You're more than halfway to your crossover point, and the growth is accelerating dramatically. At this trajectory, you'd cross the $1.2 million threshold around age 65, which is the traditional retirement age. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so I invest consistently for 35 years and retire at a normal age. What's so revolutionary about this? And this is where I need to challenge everything you've been conditioned to believe about how this works. That scenario I just walked through, investing $500 monthly for 35 years, that's the slow path. That's what happens when you invest a relatively conservative amount and simply wait for compound interest to do all the heavy lifting over multiple decades. But here's the critical insight that changes everything. The crossover point isn't a fixed, immovable target. It's a function of two variables, the size of your investment portfolio and the size of your expenses. And here's what almost nobody realizes. Reducing your expenses moves the crossover point favorably from both directions simultaneously. Let me show you exactly what I mean with concrete numbers. In our first scenario, you had $4,000 in monthly living costs, requiring $1.2 million to achieve crossover. But what happens if you optimize your life and reduce your expenses to $3,000 monthly? Now your crossover number is only $900,000. You just eliminated $300,000 from your target, which at our current investment rate saves you approximately 7 years of labor. But it gets significantly better than that. If your expenses are lower, you have additional capital available to invest. Instead of investing $500 monthly, maybe you can now invest $1,000. Let's run those revised numbers. $1,000 per month invested at 8% annual returns for 25 years gets you to approximately $860,000. Combine that with your lowered expense target of $3,000 monthly, meaning you only need $900,000, and suddenly you're crossing over at age 55 instead of age 65. You just purchased yourself 10 years of freedom by making two strategic adjustments, spending less and investing more. And here's where people really underestimate the leverage they have access to. What if you got truly radical about this? What if you house hacked and completely eliminated your housing payment? What if you relocated to a lower cost of living region? What if you managed to get your monthly expenses down to $2,000? Now your crossover number drops to $600,000. At $1,000 per month invested, you'd reach that threshold in approximately 18 years. You could achieve complete financial independence in your late 40s, potentially earlier if you increased your investment rate over time as your income grew. The crossover point isn't some distant fantasy reserved exclusively for tech entrepreneurs and inheritance recipients. It's a mathematical certainty that you can dramatically accelerate by attacking both sides of the equation aggressively. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because I need to talk about what happens psychologically as you approach and then eventually pass through the crossover point. Most financial content focuses exclusively on the numbers and the mathematics, but the mental transformation is equally important, possibly more important. When you first start investing, every dollar you allocate feels like a genuine sacrifice. It's money you could be deploying on things you want right now in the present. You're delaying gratification based on some abstract promise of future benefits that feels uncertain and far away. And honestly, it kind of sucks. The amounts feel trivial and meaningless. Your portfolio increases by $30 one day and decreases by $50 the next. The crossover point feels impossibly distant, like trying to see the other side of the ocean, but something shifts as your portfolio grows. There's a psychological threshold, and it's different for every individual, but for many people, it occurs somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in accumulated investments. Suddenly, your portfolio feels real. It feels substantial. A 2% market gain isn't just a few dollars anymore. It's $1,000 or more in a single day. You start to viscerally feel compound interest actually working. Your money is doing something. It's active. It's alive. And your relationship to your employment starts to change even before you reach the actual crossover point. This is what I call the freedom gradient. Most people conceptualize financial independence as binary. You're either dependent on your job or you're not. You're either working or you're retired. But that's not how it actually feels in practice as you move through the journey. As your investment income grows incrementally, you become progressively more free. And when your investments generate $500 per month, that's your car payment covered passively. When they generate $1,000, that's your car payment plus your grocery bill. At $2,000 monthly, the majority of your non-housing expenses are covered by passive income. Each milestone grants you more options, more negotiating power, more ability to decline things you don't want to do, more courage to take risks. You don't have to wait until the lines fully cross to start experiencing the tangible benefits of this journey. There's a concept in the FIRE movement called coast FIRE that illustrates this principle perfectly. Coast FIRE is the point at which you've invested enough capital that even if you never contributed another single dollar, compound interest alone will grow your portfolio to your crossover number by traditional retirement age. Let me show you the math. Let's say you're 30 years old and you want to have $1.2 million by age 60. That's 30 years from now. At 8% annual returns, working backwards, you'd need approximately $150,000 invested today for it to coast to $1.2 million without adding another cent. If you're 30 years old with $150,000 in investments, you're at coast fire. You could theoretically transition to a lower-paying job that you're passionate about. You could work part-time. You could stop investing aggressively and redirect that money toward experiences and lifestyle instead. Your retirement is mathematically guaranteed. You've punched your ticket. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating for this approach because continuing to invest obviously gets you to full financial independence faster and provides you more margin for error and unexpected events. But understanding coast fire illustrates how the crossover point creates options long before you actually reach it. A 2022 survey from Empower found that 57% of Americans believe they'll never be able to retire comfortably. But most of those people have never calculated their personal crossover point. They've never realized that they have a specific, achievable number to target, and that there are concrete, tactical actions they can take to reach it faster. They're just vaguely anxious about an undefined future, which is psychologically paralyzing in a way that specific goal setting with clear action steps is not. Let me address some objections because I know what you're thinking right now. Evan, the stock market is volatile. What about crashes? What about inflation? What about all the things that could derail this plan? These are completely legitimate concerns, and I'm not going to pretend the path to the crossover point is a smooth, straight line. It absolutely is not. You will experience market downturns. Actually, your portfolio will lose 20%, 30%, potentially even 40% of its value at some point during your journey. The average bear market occurs approximately every 4 years, and the average decline is roughly 33%. This is normal, this is expected, and it's already factored into the 8% average annual return we've been using in our calculations, which includes all the crashes, recessions, and financial panics of the last 100 years. The critical factor is that you're not withdrawing money during the accumulation phase. When the market crashes, you're still buying. You're actually purchasing more shares at lower prices, which accelerates your progress toward the crossover point, even though your portfolio balance temporarily decreases. Dollar cost averaging through market downturns is one of the most powerful wealth-building mechanisms available to regular investors. But it only works if you don't panic and sell, which is why understanding the crossover point psychologically is so important. You're not tracking your portfolio for entertainment or to feed your anxiety. You're watching the gap between two lines slowly close, knowing with certainty that temporary setbacks don't change the mathematical inevitability of where you're heading. As for inflation, the 4% safe withdrawal rate is specifically engineered to account for inflation. The original Trinity study that established this rate tested portfolios against historical periods that included high inflation environments, and the 4% rule held up. Additionally, stocks have historically been an excellent inflation hedge because companies raise their prices in response to inflation, which flows through to their earnings and ultimately their stock prices. Your crossover number will rise with inflation over time, but your portfolio will roughly track alongside it. Is there risk? Of course, the future is inherently uncertain. But the alternative, never investing and remaining completely dependent on trading your time for money until you physically can't work anymore, that's not less risky, it's actually more risky. You're just trading investment risk for longevity risk, health risk, and labor market risk. At least with the crossover point strategy, you have a mathematical plan that has worked for literally everyone who has executed it consistently. Here's what I want you to actually do with this information. Because understanding the crossover point intellectually is completely useless if it doesn't translate into changed behavior. First, calculate your current monthly expenses. Not what you think they are, what they actually are. Go through the last 3 months of bank and credit card statements and add up literally everything. Be brutally honest with yourself. Most people discover they're spending 15 to 20% more than they estimated. This is your baseline reality. Second, multiply your monthly expenses by 12 to get your annual cost of living. Then multiply that annual number by 25. This is your crossover point number at a 4% withdrawal rate. Write this number down somewhere, you'll see it regularly. This is the portfolio size that would make employment optional for you. Third, check your current investment balance across all accounts. Subtract that from your crossover number. This is your gap. This is the distance between where you are right now and complete financial independence. Fourth, calculate how many years until you close that gap based on your current monthly investment rate. There are compound interest calculators all over the internet that make this easy. Be honest about what you're actually investing each month, not what you wish you were investing. Fifth, and this is where the real action happens, ask yourself how you could accelerate this timeline. Could you increase your income through a job change, a side business, or skill development? Could you decrease your expenses by house hacking, relocating to a lower cost area, or eliminating lifestyle inflation? Could you invest financial windfalls like tax refunds, bonuses, or inheritances instead of spending them? Every $1,000 you invest generates approximately $40 per year of passive income indefinitely. Every $100 you permanently cut from your monthly expenses reduces your crossover target by $30,000. These aren't abstract concepts. These are levers you can actually pull. I want to leave you with a reframe that I think about constantly, every single day. Every purchase you make has two distinct costs. There's the obvious money you spend, but there's also the crossover time you sacrifice. When you buy a $30,000 car instead of a $15,000 car, you're not just spending an extra $15,000 in the present moment. You're pushing your crossover point further into the future. At an 8% return, that $15,000 would approximately double every 9 years. So that car upgrade didn't cost $15,000. It cost $30,000 in 9 years, $60,000 in 18 years, $120,000 in 27 years. It cost months or potentially years of freedom at the back end of your life. I'm not saying never spend money on things you genuinely enjoy and value. I'm saying understand the actual trade-off. Money isn't just money, it's compressed future time. It's the months you'll spend working when you could have been free. The crossover point makes this trade-off visible and quantifiable. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Every financial decision becomes a question of whether you're moving toward the crossover or away from it. Whether you're buying yourself freedom or selling it, the average American will earn approximately $2 million over their working lifetime and end up almost completely dependent on Social Security in retirement, which pays an average of roughly $1,800 monthly. They'll have worked for 45 years and have almost nothing to show for it, because every dollar that came in went right back out the door. The crossover point offers a different path, not an easy path, but a clear one. Save aggressively, invest consistently, reduce your expenses intelligently, and wait for the mathematics to work. The lines will cross. They always do for the people who stick with it long enough. And when they cross, you'll wake up on some random Wednesday morning, check your accounts, and realize that your money is finally working harder than you are. That's the moment everything changes. If this video helped you see your financial life differently, smash that like button and subscribe for more content that challenges how you think about money and freedom. I'll see you in the next one.